This is Brandon Card, and one of my favorite ways of offshore fishing is long lining a crankbait. And what I'm talking about long lining is where I take a crankbait that normally dives anywhere from 16 to 18 foot, and I can get that crankbait in depths of 35 foot. And I've done it all over the TVA chain. I live on Douglas Lake. The fish get really, really deep there. I can catch them on a deep plug in 30 foot of water. And here on Kentucky Lake this week at Bass Fest, I'm catching fish in 22 to 25 foot of water. And it's just a really, really awesome technique for catching fish that are deep. And so what I do is I get on the trolling motor, I put the trolling motor on high, and I cast behind my boat. And then I take that trolling motor and I go directly over my waypoints where I've marked fish, and I'm just letting line out. The spool has to be open. The rule is with strolling is that the spool has to be open. You can't engage the reel until you take your foot off the trolling motor. So I'll go way past the waypoints where I know the fish are, and then I'll take my foot off the trolling motor, engage the reel, and I point my rod directly at my line. So I'm bringing my crankbait straight through where I just passed over. And this is a great way of catching fish that are scattered, kind of scattered like across a ridge. This week I'm fishing several different ridges and humps where they're not really grouped up that tight. And so I can cover that whole entire strike zone, and a lot of times bass will actually be competitive with each other. So one of them will start following the crankbait, the other one will follow the crankbait, and then there's kind of a competition thing, and then finally one will eat it. So that's kind of what I'm doing this week. I've searched high and low for the right rod. Everybody asks me, I don't really know which rod to use. Do I use a cranking rod? Should I use a flipping rod? And I don't like a traditional cranking rod. For one, they're just way too flimsy. Whenever you have 100 yards of line out and a bass eats your crankbait and you set the hook and it bends double, you're not gonna get the hook in them. So for years, I used a flipping stick. And I thought that was a little bit too stiff. Sometimes I felt the crankbait, pull out of the fish's mouth. So the two rods that I use now, that I love, are these Abu Garcia 711 extra heavy cranking rods. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's got the backbone and the stiffness of a flipping rod, but it still has the parabolic action of a cranking rod. And so this one's a Veracity, and this one's a Veritas, and they're the exact same length, exact same action. The Veritas has a little bit more bend to it. The Veracity is a little bit stiffer, but I like both of them. These are the two that I use. I always use a winch, a Revo winch. A low gear ratio reel is a must whenever you're long lining, because with a high gear ratio reel, you're not going to be able to reel as fast because the gears kind of slow down the retrieve. So I use these Revo winches. The line is just 10 pound, 100% trilene fluorocarbon, and every once in a while I'll use 15 pound if I feel like there's a whole lot of rock or shell or anything that's going to fray my line. But 10 pound is what I use most of the time, and a 6XD is hard to beat. I long line a bunch of different crankbaits, but this is a crankbait that a lot of these really deep fish, they don't see this crankbait because most guys throw this in 15 to 18 foot of water. I can get this 6XD in 30 to 35 foot of water. So it's a smaller profile. You can present a smaller bait to those fish that are normally used to seeing those giant crankbaits, those Man's 30 pluses or the 10XDs. Show them a little bit smaller bait and get a lot more bites. So next time you're offshore fishing, go out there and long line some crankbaits and you'll have a lot of success.